Today's episode celebrates completing 1 full year of this podcast, done weekly in 2023 and bi-weekly in 2024. So I'm using this as the basis of today's theme. You see, one of our challenges in business is that we can get caught up in planning and never get around to doing, which gives us the now famous concept of ready, fire, aim, implying that we should start executing things before they're perfect, lest we never execute them at all. We can always aim or improve things as we go along. But another challenge we can have is getting so caught up in action items that we never take a moment to stop and celebrate our milestones, our wins along the way. These celebrations do more than give meaning to our progress. As we'll talk about in today's episode, they can help to ensure we're progressing in the right direction. And on that note, we'll end this episode with news about the direction of this podcast. This is the Heart Body Business Podcast. Inspiration, tips, and tools for entrepreneurs seeking a more fulfilling type of success. One that stems from exploring and expressing their true passion and purpose, and finding healthy ways to do so. All coupled with insights and action items to get a business moving in the right direction. I'm Steve, your host, and I invite you to learn more at heartbodybusiness.com. Years ago, I went to see Lilith Fair with a special interest in seeing Jewel and Sarah McLachlan perform. We ended up arriving late and found that parking was far from the event itself. We needed to take a long hike up a hill. And eager not to miss the whole point of going to it, I was pretty much in a hurry for us to get going. But a lovely friend of mine at the time urged me to slow down and smell the roses, to enjoy the people I was with, and to keep a mood of joy as we made our way to the event. It wasn't worth a miserable hike to the top for something in the future. This isn't to say there are never times for us to take fast action on something, but the element of staying present as we do so is always important. It's one of the big themes of this podcast and of my book, Who Moved My Chi? I'm grateful for that friend, as that moment has always stuck with me, and it's important for us in business and entrepreneurial pathways. However we might look for success, if we find no joy in what we accomplish, then we can never be successful. Because how could you ever define success without joy? Now, even though one theme of this podcast is health, the body portion of Heart Body Business, there's a reason that heart comes before body. It represents the core of who we are, while the body is temporary. So on the theme of health, I've often said that I'm less concerned with someone getting physically well than I am with their inner journey. In a similar way, while we can celebrate specific wins, and we should, how much more powerful can that be if we look not only at how we've grown our business, but also at how we've grown ourselves? Today, I'm celebrating 1 completed year of doing this podcast, and if I were to look only at its growth, I could easily be underwhelmed, because its organic reach, how many people are tuning in to each episode, hasn't grown as it could have. But in the meantime, I've personally learned a ton about audio production and podcasts. I've learned about advertising through both YouTube and Prodvigate. And these are the types of things that help me in other ventures, regardless of the traffic here. Besides all this, while it doesn't bode well for a business, I've always felt that personal projects are valuable even if you have a small audience, as long as you're able to make a difference in someone's life. Meanwhile, let me give you a practical tip on advertising podcasts on YouTube in case that's ever a pathway for you. I personally found that in its built-in advertising platform, YouTube was able to drive me a lot of actual subscribers for very little money. But there was something really strange about this because the watch time and engagement rate were extremely low. I cannot imagine YouTube getting away with sending bots for traffic, but it's all I could deduce from this. After all, who would watch less than 30 seconds of a video, not like it, not comment on it, but subscribe to a channel? I mean, some people might, but not at the rate YouTube was sending. Meanwhile, an outside service called Prodvigate got me substantial watch time but relatively few subscribers and ultimately still no one commenting. Although in many instances I'm not emphasizing questions in my episodes. Personally, I prefer watch time over subscribers who are not watching the videos. So this, of course, is just my experience with these two platforms, but that's a little of what I learned. In any case, throughout this year, other things have happened. My concept of 3 consciousness centers in the body predates this podcast and was written about in detail in my book called Game Manual a few years ago. But inspired by the early episodes of this podcast and its central theme, I simplified and focused this message in a newer book called Who Moved My Chi, which might never have been born without this podcast. And because of the audio work I had done here, I was able to turn that book into my first audiobook as well. You can find the print, Kindle, and audiobook formats on Amazon. So now it's your turn. What kind of milestones do you have set out for yourself in business or even in your personal journey? Do you have points laid out when you'll remember to celebrate what you've done and, more importantly, who you've become? What about recent milestones? Can you look back at them and, regardless of business progress made, celebrate what you learned along the way? Can you see other ways in which that will change your life? With the milestone celebration comes the opportunity for reflection on where you're headed. It's like quarterly and especially annual planning in a business where we look at what we've done and what we are planning to do from here, and we decide if we need to adjust plans, either based on which of our efforts succeeded and which did not, as well as based on what's happening in the larger world. Our efforts have their environment. But we don't need to be in a corporate setting to reflect in a regular way like this. In celebrating 1 year of podcasting, I know at this point I've laid down a substantial body of content that anyone can access going forward. So I'm altering the plan for new content. That is, I will maintain what's already published, and if I feel called to share on a new topic, I will. But I'm letting go of specific schedules or frequency in order to focus on other forms of content. For instance, I found a passion around writing lyrics that AI technology helps me turn into fully rendered songs. And I've begun working on a book about AI that I expect will be pretty provocative. In the meantime, when I do post future episodes of this podcast, I'll likely start focusing on interviews with successful business people, but with the heart, body, business theme. That is, how do we live our purpose and stay healthy and experience joy in the process of being successful? And all of this from the people who are really doing it. So while I can't promise timing at the moment, you may wish to subscribe for that sort of content in the future, because that for sure will be brass tacks, real people with their best tips on what it really means to be successful. So I, for one, am celebrating, and if you've been along for this ride at all, I'm deeply grateful for every minute you've spent with me, and I hope we'll spend more over time. Meanwhile, I'm embracing my own call to different types of content, looking for where I can best share ideas to shift minds and shift the world. On that note, I encourage you to check your own rudder. We're all here to make things shift. In our own ways, of course, on our own scales. But we're here to make things shift, and making the right changes in the right people and places in a way that only we can do Well, that is what we're here for. That is where we find our joy, and it is how we have success. So celebrate those wins and use them to steer towards whatever has the most meaning for you. Till next time, thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe. You can also join our mailing list to get alerts on our latest episodes and other tips, tools, and news. Learn more and sign up at heartbodybusiness.com.